Okay. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yep,
okay,
I can see
sounds
it.
good. So, I'm not sure that this will take the full hour that it's slotted for. But I just wanted to, after basically the WSA guidelines, which I was part of putting together with Lisa, our executive director, and a few others. After we released that, I felt that as you know, as a coach, taking off my technical director hat and putting on the hat of somebody who's going to walk on the fields with these kids here at some point in the next few weeks, that for my own understanding, wanted to elaborate a little bit on some of the points made in the guidelines, and try and assign some of the things that I'm thinking about and I'm considering to the 6 tasks of a coach. So when we talk about coach education, particularly through the federation pathway, they frame the tasks of a coach this way: coaching games, coaching training sessions, managing the performance environment, leading the player, leading the team, and leadership. And I just thought if I could try and frame some of these return to play guidelines in this format, then I might be able to sort of make more sense of exactly what the practical applications to this are as a director of coaching at a club level, as a technical director for a state association, which is coming up to some, state association tryout period here in the summer, and as a coach stepping onto the field with my players. So the first thing, just going through the list as it's written, is coaching games. When we talk about playing competitive games again, particularly when we move up the game models to 7v7, 9v9, 11v11, there is still a lack of clarity, I guess, from depending on which league you play in. Obviously, down in Laramie, we're based in the Colorado League. Obviously, Wyoming we have our own league in state, which there's some changes coming to the format of that league, but it's still ultimately going to be tournament based. So just considerations for games when they return back around. Our tournament's going to be thinking about restricting numbers and doing more of a 5v5 tournament in the near future. If you're, as a club or as a coach, planning on attending tournaments prior to, let's say January 1st, the fall season, will we see changes to those tournaments? If the tournament format is not changing, what are the protocols in place for spectators, and how is it going to be refereed? Is there club involvement? Is there state involvement? Obviously, if it's an 11v11 game, you're talking about 22 players plus 3 referees plus 2 coaches plus subs and then spectators at the field. So just things to consider on how to mitigate some of this stuff, how to continue social distancing. Obviously, coaching games, you want to minimize player contact. Again, really difficult to do in game. We'll talk a little bit here about personal protective equipment as we move through this, and what would be appropriate for a player to wear and what wouldn't, and what you will be encouraging as a coach and what you won't be. I know at club level here, we're going to have our coaches, our volunteers, and any staff members in masks. We will have sanitation stations with sanitizer in them on the practice fields at both locations that we use here in Laramie. When the fields are laid out, there'll be a line, as there are in many fields now, but there'll be clear lines for where the players can enter and where the spectators can't. So just minimizing that contact, finding ways to do that, working with local city parks and rec departments, whatever it is, to try and make it as safe a return to play as possible. If you do get to the games, we do get to the point at the fall season where we're playing 11v11 games, and as of right now, there's no reason to think why we wouldn't. will half time look the same? Do you want a crowd of, potentially 18 players surrounding you as the coach, shoulder to shoulder? Do we need to as coaches, do we need to restructure the way that we deliver our halftime team talk? Is it a case of just spreading everybody out a little bit more and pronouncing our voices and enunciating a little bit better? Or do we segment the halftime now? Do maybe we speak to the goalkeeper and the defenders, and then we move on to speaking to the midfielders separately, and then the forwards? And is there a way to make that work, or do we need everybody communicating with each other? Things that you as a coach are going to have to make a decision on pretty soon. If like most club representatives that I have spoken to, you're looking at returning to play at some point in June. These are all things that you're going to have to think about, not just from an organizational standpoint, as as a club leader, but just as a coach on the field with your kids. You're going to have to consider how you're going to address the players, and we'll come on to that next in the coaching training sessions. The other part to this, especially as it affects us in Wyoming, is that the leagues and the tournaments that we played in that I mentioned, yes, you'll play some in state, but some teams, a lot of clubs I know, will be traveling out of state to play in these tournaments. And the considerations that you might have to make when traveling. How will that affect, from a head coach of a team standpoint, will it affect your numbers if you tell your group of parents you're going to Colorado for a long weekend, in the heart of Denver, for example? If numbers become an issue, how do you mitigate that? What's the communication like with the other coaches that are in your club, or through your director of coaching, or your club president or board, or whoever it is? Have you established right now, before the problem arises, have you established open lines of communication with these people? Have you started to have the discussions, the what ifs? What if we don't have enough kids to go to this tournament? Where can we pull kids from? Are there other kids in the club that are willing to travel? And for those that aren't willing to travel, what are the options for them? Should they be punished because they don't want to leave the state, or they don't want to leave the town, or whatever whatever restrictions they're under? Can we still provide opportunities for those guys if they're not traveling on these tournament weekends? Just again, things to consider in regards to game schedules coming up here in the fall and in the spring. Coaching training sessions. This obviously is a big one from a coaching perspective. When you talk about session design, initially you want to try and reduce, obviously, the amount of players that are on the field. You don't necessarily want to go to an 11v11 scrimmage from session one. You probably want to build back towards that, not just from a health and safety standpoint, but from a developmental standpoint as well. Traditionally, if you were doing a pre-season, you'd maybe start the games with larger numbers to reduce the physical load, and then work smaller to increase the physical load, and then work back out to the 11v11 game. Traditionally that's what you would do, but in the current times, I'm not sure by the time you get back to playing in June, you're going to want to jump straight into an 11v11 game, or a 9v9 game, or a 7v7 game, whatever it is, just because of the amount of kids, the amount of people, the amount of numbers that you'll have on the field at one time. So when we talk about designing sessions, we're probably talking about individual ball work to some extent. I know I've spoken to a couple of people across the state, George up in Jackson, Brian in Cheyenne, I'm in contact with regularly, about the type of content they're putting together for their teams and their kids. A lot of it is orientated around individual ball work, but what I am nervous about, what I am a little hesitant about, is that we're just going to have every coach in the state, or even every coach in the country, just out there running, telling kids what to do. Do this, copy me. And I do think there's definitely value for the kids being back on the ball. There's definitely value in just getting back out and playing the game and running around and being more active, 100%. And there's definitely going to be a time for individual ball work, but we can't spend an hour and a half of a kid stood in a 6x6 square juggling, or toe taps, or whatever it may be. So how can we increase our opportunities for the players to develop while maintaining, well, being responsible and to the current restrictions we're under. So we talked about. Sorry, I'm just getting a notification that somebody wants to jump in here. So back to session design. When we talk about socially distancing in small groups, obviously the first thing that pops into mind is passing and receiving. So we can maybe start to do some more functional work, working as a back four across a whole field and a goalkeeper on building out from the back, unopposed, or giving them some sort of time limit, or giving them gates to work through, or limiting the amount of passes they need to do, or putting a pass limit in. There are ways that we can make it functional and still adhere to social distancing rules. Can we apply things directly to the game? You know, patterns of play, both on the ball and off the ball. We talked about shadow defending, so just moving with the ball as the ball moves, so we know where we should be as a unit, not necessarily directly engaging with the ball. So I do think there are ways that we can continue some tactical and functional development with the players and still stick to the guidelines we're under. And what I will say also is that WSA technical staff, myself, Chuck and Don, over the next couple of weeks, will be putting some, not necessarily session plans together, because we can't, we don't know how long you're going to have with kids, what your restrictions are on field size and availability and all those sorts of things. But we are going to put some activities together that you yourself at home could piece together. There would be a well-rounded developmental session or activity that you could put together as a session. The next part to consider as we talk about session design is, traditionally, we always move towards a scrimmage at the end of practice. You have 10 players turn up, you finish with 5v5, or you have 18 players turn up, you finish with 9v9, that type of thing. And the considerations around that, not just for yourself as a coach, but obviously the players, the parents, you're going to see I anticipate us seeing a varying level of wanting to interact, or keenness maybe is the best word to describe it, to interact closely with another kid, another person, another player. If maybe kids will be comfortable playing 3v3, but if you say, hey, everybody, we're going to finish with 7v7, 9v9, 10v10, whatever it is, a lack of comfort with that because of the increase in numbers. So traditionally, if you use the play, practice, play model, we go from small game session design, active learning in the middle, and then finish with play phase 2. Maybe play phase 2 needs to look a bit more like play phase 1 did, instead of going to big numbers. The only way to know that is to communicate with your team, communicate with your team parents. I know it from a club level here. We in Laramie are putting together a survey for our parents that each coach will be asked to send out to their team, so we can get some feedback on how comfortable parents and players are going to be upon returning to practice, as it pertains to both the summer programming that we've got coming up in June and July, and if they're not comfortable in the summer, what would make them comfortable to come back in the fall, if anything. So if you can find an avenue again to communicate with the people that are in charge of your club, or you are a club leader, and you can find a way to communicate with your membership to get feedback on this situation, I think that would be incredibly valuable to you guys as well. Restricting your numbers at practice, difficult one. If you're coaching 2 age groups, you definitely want to consider splitting those 2 sessions if you maybe did them together. So you don't have 30, 40 kids at practice or on one field at one time. Consider your field size. You want to make sure that you have some level of boundary around your field. If you're coaching younger age groups, U6, U10, below U10, I would say, but below U11 maybe. you definitely want to make it clear to parents where they can stand in relation to your field size, in terms of your layout. If you are U12 and older, full disclosure again, here in Laramie at club level, we'll be recommending that players are dropped off and picked up. If parents do want to stay, they'll be asked to stay in or next to their own car, to try and mitigate some of the foot traffic that's just on the fields at the time. Again, I do want you guys that are listening in to take some practical ideas away from this. So even if your club aren't putting these types of things in place, you as a coach are able to. Minimizing player contact comes back to your session design to a certain extent, but this relates more to how when you plan your session, make sure that you have a designated place for bags and water bottles and all that sort of stuff. Equipment, I know, full disclosure, I coach a U15 boys team. If a goal needs moved, it's not me doing it, it's the players. But that, even just that little 30 seconds in a session where I say, okay, boys, go grab the goal, bring it in to the line, that goes away now. We can't do that. We can't have 6-8 kids all grabbing the same posts and carrying the post and carrying the goals over. That has to stop. So when you design your sessions, you have to bear these things in mind. The things that you need to execute must be available to you and you only, because we do not want the kids, parents, players, volunteers, anybody touching your equipment, touching the equipment other than yourself. And then when we talk about organizing the teams, the recommendation from WSA is to not share pennies or jerseys, or not share anything at this point. So how are you going to organize your teams? You need to pre-plan your session and communicate to your kids that if you're going to finish with 3v3, 4v4, whatever it is, that these players need to wear black, these players need to wear white, these players need to wear red, whatever it is. Or maybe you tell them, make sure you bring 2 colors alternate, so you have a bit of freedom in the session to move players around. But just things that you need to consider as a coach as we get going again, as you start to think about planning your sessions, as you start to think about working with the players, all these things have to come into consideration. Managing the performance environment is arguably the biggest part of this, because essentially that or hopefully you're in the knowledge that when the players are directly under your stewardship, that they're safe, they're in a safe environment. You've planned the session well, you've planned ahead to the point where this session itself is going to go well, and they're socially distanced, and we can maintain WSA guidelines. But the environment around the session is also your responsibility to a certain extent. Certainly the responsibility of the club, board members, directors of coaching, whatever you have at your club, whatever your club level looks like. This is a big part of it. And the first thing, again, is communication. Communication to your membership, communication to your team parents. Not everybody will have seen the WSA guidelines that were sent out last week. It is the responsibility of you as coaches, you as club leaders, your boards, whoever it is, to make sure that they get this information out. Okay? That at a very bare minimum, every parent of every player that's going to step on the field at some point in the next few weeks has had the opportunity to see the WSA guidelines, especially the part that pertains to them, whether they're their parent, top soccer coach, top soccer player, whatever it is, that everybody has had access to this document and has at least read the part that's pertinent to them. And then on top of that, laying out the expectations from a club level on exactly what that looks like. So the WSA document provides guidance on best practice, but doesn't necessarily establish the process of every best practice, because it can't. It's a blanket document that has to try and apply to as many people as possible, but there are going to be specifics that apply just to you and your club, your team, whatever it is. So you need to make sure that you're laying out those expectations to the parents and providing additional club guidance, things like sanitizing stations, masks, gloves, who's providing them, who isn't, who needs to wear what, where are the parents going to stand, exactly where are the parents not going to stand. Like if you have at your fields, an opportunity for the, if there's bleachers there, if you practice at a high school or something, you probably don't want the parents up in the bleachers, touching the bleachers, because that creates a problem, not just for you as a coach, you as a club, potentially other people touching those surfaces, coming in contact with people in that environment, but the people that are going to come in after you, the people who work at the school, all those sorts of things, all these things have to be laid out. The schedule of your team training, of the teams training that are part of your club, you don't want 8 teams turning up at the same time. So you need to make sure that, that your club is being proactive in how you schedule your practices, how everybody's practice is scheduled, and the field locations. And bear in mind that it would be a good idea to have a period of time where one session has ended to allow people to get out for the next session to begin. So that the next group can get in, and there's no a massive crossing of people. Even though you might be listening to this as an individual coach, these things are going to apply to you. So if you are not in the position to be able to go and instigate some of these things at a leadership level, at least you can have the conversations with the people you need to have the conversations with.
Write letters to First Interstate to help fund this for next year as well. But I think that there's an element.
George, I'm meeting you, bud. So we covered field availability. When we talk about parents and spectators, I told you what we're going to be doing here in Laramie. We are going to be, U11 and below. Parents will be asked to stay in or, next to their own cars and not on the fields. At U12 and above, we'll be recommending that players are dropped off and picked up. But if not, if parents are going to stay, that they adhere to those social distancing rules in relation to the spectators on the field. Certainly at practice. During the breaks in your sessions, you want to make sure that the bags and the kids' bags and the drinks and all that sort of stuff, that A, they're not sharing with each other, and that B, all your kids' equipment is not right next to the coach next door's equipment. That we're being responsible about where we're positioning ourselves on the field, and then finally, looking after yourself in terms of personal protection equipment and sanitizer. You practice. Make sure that we're practicing good hygiene and that we're washing our own hands. The soccer team sports, especially at youth level, tends to be a lot of high-fiving, a lot of patting on the head, fist bumping, all that sort of stuff. That's going to have to stop. But to a certain point, it's natural human behavior to behave and interact like that. So if it does happen, we want to make sure that we're, looking after ourselves and washing our hands before and after and not touching our own faces and all that sort of stuff. Consider wearing a mask if that makes you more comfortable and you able to deliver a better session for the players, that the players will have a better time. Do whatever makes you most comfortable. If you are not comfortable returning to practice, then you've got to let somebody know at club level. And then so the club have an opportunity to find alternative ways to keep the players active. Same advice for managers and volunteers. I would recommend that you keep that limited or as limited as possible during your sessions. If it's you and assistant coach, maybe it's just you two on the field. Maybe team manager and snack provider and all those other things that you might have in place don't need to be there when you return to practice. When we talk about leading the player and leading the team, this is mainly about sort of re-engaging the players to a certain extent. Maybe prior, I was thinking, this is just me thinking out loud now, is how it pertains to my group, is prior to the first team session that takes place, maybe I'll work with smaller groups a week or two beforehand so that we ease people in to the process of training again, back as a group of kids. These kids some of them will have not seen their friends for weeks, and will need to be sort of reintroduced to just working in a small group environment, and then maybe into the bigger environment, reducing time sessions. So thinking maybe I bring the defenders and maybe I bring the goalkeepers in for 30 minutes, work with them, get them out. Defenders come in for the next 30 minutes, get them out. Midfielders come in for the next 30 minutes, get them out. Attackers come in for the final 30, and then we get them out. And then over a 2 hour span, I've coached every player, small group environment, more attention to detail, able to work on some more niche areas of their game, whether it be tactical or technical. Because the group is small, we have a little bit more freedom as to where we can go and what we can do. And just short, sharp bursts of sessions to get them back into the habit. And then re-engaging the team off the field prior to coming back. If you not, I'm sure all you guys aren't doing webinars to coaches like myself, but I'm sure some of you are already doing webinars with your players. I would say if you're not already doing that, now is the time to sort of pick that back up, just to get the players in the frame of mind. Okay, yep, soccer's coming back. Chance to speak to their teammates on Skype and get some of the social stuff out of the way before arriving at the field. I think that's a key part of this, is that, some of the players will have been disconnected from their teammates now for a bunch of weeks, and there will be a social element to getting back together. And as a coach, it's going to be really hard to mitigate every single one of those interactions. So reintroducing everybody online in Skype and Zoom meetings might help mitigate some of that a little bit. If you have any online content worth sharing in terms of player development, training videos, if your club have been doing training videos, or neighboring clubs and wherever, just various online resources. Can we start sharing those a little bit more with our kids, so they just, even if they're not actively doing everything you send out, that we're just getting back into, soccer mode, that we're re-engaging with the game. And then if you do come up with some social distance session design, what we're going to try and do, or what I'm going to try and do with our website, is get some sort of coaches portal on there, where we can start to share those ideas as coaches. As I said, the WSA technical staff will be putting some stuff together here in the next few days, in the hope to get that up on the new website by June 1st. And then we're going to potentially try and open this up to share. If you have session plans that you've done, whether it be handwritten or done on the computer, that we have some way to share those with each other. Because I do think it's important that we share ideas at a time like this. So hopefully that will be a good resource for people as we move forwards. Leadership. This last piece is about you yourself as the coach. What are you doing to get better? This is a fantastic time for online coach education. WSA will pay for it. You can get it for free. If you have done it already, if you've done it with me in person, if you've done it online through WSA and claimed your money back, start sharing the good word. Make sure everybody is aware of what it is, how you apply for it, how you get it paid for. Just make sure that we as coaches, although we can't be on the field with our players right now, some of you may have already started, but for the most part, most of us are not. From the people that I've spoken to, aren't starting until some point in June. This is you've got a few weeks now. It's time for you to just start re-energizing yourself, start expanding your own horizons, getting back into coaching mode a little bit, and coach education would be a good way to do that. Re-engaging with the game on television. The German league started this past weekend. I know that there have been several game reruns, whether it's online or on TV. Just re-engaging with the game, having your players, recommending to your players when soccer is on TV that week, just so you re-engage your players. Just more exposure to the game. Other sources I've just listed 4 books that have not necessarily been strictly about coaching, but have just sort of guided me at certain points, because I've read them. Just certain things will pop up at certain times on how to deal with certain situations, or just valued experience from other people that have been in positions that you can learn from. I would say that these four are huge. Some of the certainly Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed I thought was very interesting, but some of you may have read the other ones already, and they can share their experiences or their recommendations. Like I said, we're going to try and build this coaches portal into the new website, so hopefully we can start to share more ideas like this as a community rather than me sitting on a webinar preaching to everybody. Next part of this is just me. I'm going to run through what we are doing at Laramie Soccer Club from June 15th to July 18th or something like that, whatever that 4-week period is. Just so people have something to reference if you're thinking about getting your club, teams, players back together. The program that or just the basic framework of the program that we are going to roll out. Again, to give you some practical ideas on what to do and how to mitigate against some of the things we're going to be up against as coaches here in the fall. But before I do that, does anybody have any questions about anything that I've discussed so far? Been talking here for a solid half an hour, and there was a lot of words involved. So hopefully somebody has something. Anybody? If not, I can just crack on. No problem. Okay, not hearing anything, so I'll go back to running through what we're going to do. Question from Hunter is, are players back under insurance now? So the process, Hunter, is that your club need to communicate with the WSA office, let them know your intended return date of play, and demonstrate some level of awareness of social distancing, what the club, what your team are doing to mitigate against some of this. And then Lisa I believe will give you a written sign off to return to play. So that's the process as I understand it, that somebody from your club or you as the club representative need to touch base with the WSA office, and they will approve you for your return to play, a written approval. So I'll just go back to what we're doing here in Laramie. Okay, so we're going to run, as of June 15th, we'll be starting a 3v3 league in Laramie. More of an academy format. Sorry, guys, there's people trying to get in. Gone away, never mind. I think what I'm terming here, or certainly what US Youth Soccer term as an academy format, where it's small-sided 3v. In our particular model, it's going to be 3v3 games that are going to be no referees. There'll be a coach present at the field, but it will be just games with reduced numbers. Some of the theory behind why we're doing it there, just because we anticipate having a mixed ability of players, right? We're not running two different programs for competitive and recreational, if that's what you want to term the programs. It'll just be one 3v3 league that everybody's invited to attend if they so wish. I myself, as the director of coaching, will place the kids on the teams to try and even those teams out a bit. And I'll talk a little bit about how I'll do that as we move through this second half of the presentation. But it's just about getting back out and learning to win by enjoying the process of winning and not having to win, basically. Because winning is a big part of player development. There's no reason why we should shelve it. So it'll be all age groups. It's going to be 3v3 games. It'll be on 30 by 20 4v4 fields. We've got 8 of them right now, although I think we might need to get a couple more, just with the way we anticipate numbers going for this program. For the U6, U8, U10s, it'll be 3 7-minute periods for the game. For the U11s and older, it'll be 2 12-minute halves, 2 games per night. So basically, the kids will be there for an hour. They'll have 2 games, and they'll play it twice a week. So they'll have games 2 nights a week. Again, 4-week program, so there'll be eight nights where a player will be turning up and playing if they choose to play in every league night, every game. We're going to try something that we've not really tried before in what we're club pass, what we're terming club pass, which is where we'll allow players to be grouped by ability and not necessarily by age. So this will be up to 2 years. So there'll be, you can be 2 years above and potentially play 2 years down. But we're going to group the teams and the players based on ability, regardless of age, within that 2-year band, as I say. Taking into account, physical abilities, technical abilities, and the fact, as I mentioned before, that this is a program open to every player of all levels, abilities, in our club. So we want to make it competitive. We want to make sure that the players that are playing in certain age groups are competitive against each other. We want to make sure that the players that maybe are a little bit younger but are technically advanced are being pushed, with the limited contact that we can have or that we are having with them. We want to make sure that the players are getting the most out of the experience. So we're going to try this. There's a lot of research out there to suggest that this is the best way to go. It's not something that I've ever really done before outside of my professional experience back in the UK, where we you do a little bit of the bio banding stuff, is what they call it, where players play on their developmental stage, not necessarily their age group. So it comes down to more of a physical aspect. So yeah, just so everybody's aware, this is something that we're going to try here in Laramie. The field setup is there'll be one coach to 2 fields. That's, I'll certainly be there. In our winter league, we only have 2 fields, so I'm normally there all night. But the way it will work is the rosters will be capped at 5, so there'll never be more than 10 people on the field. 3v3, so 6 on the field itself. The field will look like this, so there'll be coach slap bang in the middle. Your subs will be spread out in between the fields and the games themselves, and then each 2 fields will have a no spectator. That I think it's 10 feet, that gap. If I remember correctly when I spoke to the parks department, it might be 12. It's either 10 or 12 feet from the fields, and that'll be clearly lined. So spectators, know that they're not to be too close to the fields. Again, the guidance will be if you're U11 and younger, you can stay, but try and stay next to your car. More difficult if you're dealing with the parent of a 6-year-old or potentially a 5-year-old. So we try and have these provisions in place. And then, as we said, U12 and older, they'll be advised to drop off and pick up. We got a little bit more information on the academy format. It'll be a variety of teammates because of the club pass and because we're going to try and assign teams to be competitive within age groups, but not necessarily stick to the age group. Talking about building players first and the team second. So we want to encourage players on the ball. We want to encourage them to express themselves. Again, some of the research behind it suggests that too much information in a game environment is not beneficial to the development of the player, not just from a physical standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, their actual brain development. And then coaches will be encouraged to teach the game. So the coaches aren't just going to be sitting in the middle refereeing, blowing a whistle. If they see something, feel free to correct it. If they want to stop it and correct some sort of technique and demonstrate technique because they see several players do it wrong, they'll have the freedom to do so. It'll be hopefully a nice hybrid of just getting back and playing games and enjoying the game, but still getting some information from the coach. And then I'll be encouraging all of our coaches to use the coaching toolkit. Individual reference, if you're going to do that, if you're going to pull a player from the side, you've got to be 6 feet apart. So you're going to demonstrate, you want to make sure you're not demonstrating and using defenders, pushing in, pulling in against players and all that sort of stuff. Just have to be careful with those social distancing rules. That's why I'll be telling our coaches to, coach in the flow, use your freeze moments, make sure that when you do your individual reference, that just safe ways to do it. Not only will that make you a better coach, but hopefully will broaden player understanding as well. And that is it in terms of what we're doing for the first 4 weeks of return to play as a club. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody want to share what they might be doing or thinking about doing at their club level?
David, this is Joe. I got a question for you on the, and maybe you don't have an answer, but Riverton's recently put out, they're going to do a tournament here in the middle of June.
Mm-hmm.
Was the state involved with the kind of the review and the approval of that whole tournament and how they're going to execute that?
That is a good question. That I am not involved in the approval process for tournaments. That would be a question for the office. I would assume, well, I know that somehow they're going to have to try and stick to the guidelines that were put out by WSA.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how a tournament. So I mean, a June tournament to be able to put those type of restrictions in and still get a tournament going. It'd be interesting to see how it goes. But like I say, it's difficult for me to comment on it because I'm not part of the process.
Understood. Is there someone? I mean, is that a Lisa question? Would she be the one?
For sure. That's a Lisa question. Lisa, our executive director.
All right, very good. Thanks.
No problem, Joe. Sorry, I couldn't be more help.
Yeah, no worries.
Anybody else got any questions?
Dave, here in Jackson, I'll do ball mastery for the first 3 or 4 weeks. So individual, technical, developmental.
Is that going to be one player, one ball, or is that going to be can you do piggy in the middle games where players in the middle are passing and receiving, that type of thing?
No. So yeah, just to give an example of one of the sessions I'm using for the warm up, the FIFA 11 Plus.
Okay.
Where I make sure the cones are a little bit maybe farther apart.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes about 10-15 minutes, and then it's players and the player with their own ball. Or if they don't have a ball, I'll bring a ball, and then I'll make sure at the end of the session, or the coaches at the end of the session, we sanitize that ball. Then we go through different technical aspects of the game. It's either juggling, then we can do passes in pairs of 2, ball on the ground only, and then I don't know. I was still debating if we should do shooting.
I think shooting, it depends. I mean, there's nothing wrong with executing the shooting technique. That's an individual technique, I guess.
Sure.
Questions would come in about, goalkeepers and stuff like that. If you want, if you're going to be really careful, you maybe need to consider the goalkeeper position. I do have a question. I do have a question about the individual ball mastery stuff, though. What happens if you have a coach that can't demonstrate everything that you've planned? What's your plan? What's your plan to mitigate against that?
So like right now I'm preparing a portfolio session, 10-12 sessions. Mm-hmm. So the way let's say I have teams with 2 practices a week, and then I have teams with 3 practices a week. And the way I try to make it as simple as possible. So one day is specific ball mastery. Then if you have 3 trainings, the second day is a type of speed, agility, explosive power with and without the ball. And the 3rd day, I'm lucky here in Jackson to have about 5 tennis courts. So I'm doing each team 1 hour, a type of competition where we play 2v2s.
Right, on those tennis courts right next to the field?
Yeah. So that's the plan on that one. On the ones that, I'm doing myself, I don't know, whatever I can do to start the session, and I do like a small meeting with the coaches, and I do my best to demo parts of the session. So if it's a juggling, let's say, session, I'll demo the technique to the coaches. Again, luckily enough, in Justin, it's a fantastic Latino community, and a lot of players that played former pro in Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, and a lot of Europeans as well. So I'm a little bit blessed with the demo sessions.
Yeah,
I think they can get it done. But
how many? So if you just a quick question, you said at the start that you'll demonstrate to your coaches. How many teams, kids, are you going to have at the fields at one time? Have you thought about that? Is that something that's been taken?
Yeah, so I'm following the Teton County. That's where we are.
Okay.
So I'm following the Teton County rules and regulations, and we cannot have more than 25 people together. So that's participants. If you have 2-3 coaches and 20 kids, you are under. If you have 25 players, then you have 3 coaches.
So, but how many? Okay, so is that like 25 kids on half a field? 25 kids total for like the hour? On doesn't matter if you've got 3 fields. Like, how are you doing it?
So I'm dividing. You know, we have the two. I divided the teams a little bit more. So we have. I hope I can have one full-size 11v11 field per
25
team.
kids.
Not, yeah,
for 25 people, I should say, not necessarily.
Correct. Yes, participants. Yeah, and then if not, even if it's half a field, will be about 50 by 70, the designated practice area. Then what I'm planning to do on Sunday is to make some marks on the goal line and on the touch line to keep about 8 feet distance when we give them water breaks.
Okay.
So, you know, like let's say if we end up with 2 teams on an 11v11 size, one team will be on the goal line and let's say the right touch line, and then the other teams will be on the goal line and the left side of the touch line. So they will be opposite, kind of diagonal, one from each other. We have 2 teams.
That makes sense.
So yeah, I mean, hopefully we can start to go on 3v3s and 4v4s, but apparently the lacrosse canceled here in Jackson.
Yeah, well, I mean, so we here in Laramie, Legion baseball is going ahead, but in terms of summer activities, there's not much else going on apart from what we're doing as a club. Not as far as I know. I see there are a couple of people Laramie based on the call. I see, so. Yeah. Maybe they can tell me otherwise, but you know, as much as this has, you know, negatively affected spring seasons across the country, across the world, it's this summer, if you are able to in your communities get soccer restarted in a safe an appropriate environment, there is every chance that this becomes an opportunity for your organization and for your club. I know that we in Laramie spoke just a few days ago about you know, making sure that we get the word out that we are going to do something. So you know, even if there's just kids out there that just want to get out and be active, and their chosen activity this particular summer is not going to go ahead, that there is something to do, and we can provide a safe environment to do it in. So, you know, as much as it has been negatively affected our spring season, if you can frame it the right way, if you can go about doing the things in the right way, that there is an opportunity here for you, for the people in your community.
Dave, and absolutely. And I have a question for you. When you decide to do these 3v3 games or matches, whatever you want to call them, are you following your county rules and regulations? Because here in Jackson, they still want us to have social distance in place and all that. So
we put this together, and everything we did tried to keep the number of players or number of people on a field below 10, right? So that they're not exposing themselves. They won't. Then it's not a round robin format, so they're not going to be, you know, it's not like the X amount of players are going to play every player in that group on a particular night, right? So so you're not going to be exposed to a large group of players or a large group of people.
Sure.
So everything that we're doing is falling in line with our local guidelines. But I mean, we could go bigger with our numbers at this point, but we're not going to. Just because we want to make sure that we're creating the safest possible environment for the players. Like I said, the club I think we've ordered 4 gallons of sanitizer, I think. So you know, we are going to have the opportunity for parents and of spectators and the players to sanitize to a certain extent on the field. Just making sure that everything that went as soon, we'll make a final decision. So just so everybody's aware, we told our membership that we'd make a final decision on whether the 3v3 league would go ahead on June 1st, based on what happened. Now they've relaxed the guidelines a little bit as of last Friday.
Sure.
By the 15th of June, we'll have a good idea of how those relaxed guidelines have affected the local population, and we'll be able to make a better,
Sure.
create the best environment we possibly can.
And that leads, sorry, one more question. I don't want to take the time of the guys. And you definitely know more than any of us, but it takes so much time to create the practice sessions, coaching points, and all the other stuff. Yep. And now all I did is I created for about a month, maybe a month and a half. What would be your suggestion? Let's say, I'm not sure if in the rest of Wyoming it's the color code. If it's red, you don't play. If it's orange, whatever, yellow and green. Okay. What would you suggest if, let's say, on June 10th, I'm planning to start training next Tuesday. So our president will send, we work with Lisa with the return to play guidelines and all that. And we're looking good. So let's say I work to get that plan in place and it looks really good on paper. Hopefully we can execute that as well. And then let's say on June 10th, our local public and health director says, okay, we are in green. You can do full contact. You can do whatever you want. Would you recommend?
No, I would advise you do the slow and steady approach.
Okay.
Just because, this webinar is not intended to get into the whole liability, who's responsible for what or anything like that. But even if it's just from a public perception standpoint, if somebody was able to turn and point and say, I know I picked something up or I got something or at that on that day at that practice, then I think you not, I wouldn't say you're in trouble, but I just think, if you slowly but surely re-engage your membership with small-sided programming, individual programming. Hopefully, by the time we get to mid-August and we're back into the swing of things with the season,
sure.
They'll have your community will have been able to go through an adjustment period, right? So they'll have been playing for a certain amount of time, certain amount of weeks, either on their own or in small groups.
Okay.
And just mentally will be better prepared to go back to larger scale games. And I would say, even when you get back to, coaching your 11v11 team, whatever it is, you still have responsibility to design your sessions in a way where you're responsible about, the virus that's going around. It's as simple as that. You don't, the high fives at the end of practice, the hands in the group, all those sorts of things, even when all the restraints are lifted, right? Even when we're back to where we should be, and ultimately until we know that this virus is no longer a threat, things are going to change somewhat to a certain extent.
Sure. Yeah, I'm coaching 06 boys directly.
Yeah.
And those parents are so competitive. And in July, we have phenomenal tournaments in Salt Lake City area. And then it's a lot of pressure. It's like, if we get in green, can we start do that? Can we start do that? And like right now, I mean, I'm fine. I can adjust. I would
say, you have to accommodate the group, right? So like to a certain extent, you have to accommodate the parent group that you have.
Sure.
But I would also caution against, not that I'm on the side of things where being overly careful or anything like that, but I do think just for you and your own security maybe is the best way, not necessarily job or anything like that, but your own sort of your own level of being comfortable. You need to do what you think is right, for the players, right? Ultimately, we want to make sure that the players are at the heart of every decision that we make. And if you think that putting them in an environment like that is not the right thing to do, then you need to make sure you're voicing that opinion.
Sure.
You know, parents to a certain extent are customers. So you have to you know, please the customer to a certain extent, but the welfare of the players needs to be, you know, first and foremost.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much, Dave.
Yep, no problem. Anybody else? As always, you can contact me via email, davidh@wyomingsoccer.com. My cell phone number is available on the website. Do want a final shout out to the coach development initiative that WSA rolls out. You can get free online coach education. If you just go to the website, it tells you exactly what to do and how to do it. The more education you have, the better environment you provide for your players, COVID or no COVID. So, you know, please take advantage of that. We also now have a bursary for reimbursing in-person courses. So if you want to do an in-person course, please get in touch as well. I know no courses are running right now this summer, but when they start picking them back up in August and September, get in touch with us. We will help you as much as we possibly can. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for logging in and listening. Looking forward to connecting again next week. Speak to everybody soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you soon, George. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.